There's so many things that you can learn to run a whole hospitality business. You're going to be good at one or two things naturally, but at any point you can reach a size that you are no longer qualified to do everything. And that's okay. And start to hire people that are not you. At that point, now you're running a real business.
It's my great pleasure to welcome Sean Rakidzich to the podcast. Sean, thank you for joining us today. You do a great job of going through your journey and educating people on how to actually scale this business, right? How did kind of talking about the journey help you going through the growing pains of launching any business?
Me teaching, ever since I started coaching, hearing the story that they told me about why they thought they were failing and then me seeing what actually was failing allowed me a few different ways to learn.
I think if you find a market that works, like you really want to lean into that versus like going in for a few and then you have to kind of rebuild everything in a completely different system in a different city. What would you do in that situation? Would you counsel people to consolidate?
Your biggest strength, no matter what industry you're in, is your willingness to kill. You will put yourself into the trenches and do anything to survive. And at one point, that's going to be what saves you. And you can't be in 3 cities to fight that fight.
Welcome back to STR Like the Best. I'm your host, Michael Chang. It's my great pleasure to welcome Sean Rakidzich to the podcast. Sean, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, it's good to be here with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, Sean, I was telling Sean when we were off camera, when I first launched the podcast, Sean was on my list of 25 people that I wanted to interview. So for me, this is a special treat. I hope everyone that listens to this will enjoy it. I personally will enjoy doing this. Sean was one of the original educators, first on YouTube when I first started my journey. So for me, it's almost kind of like a time warp back to when I first started. So for folks that don't know Sean, let me give him a few seconds to introduce himself.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, my name is Sean Rakidzich. Hi, guys. I am a business owner, gone Airbnb host, and I think Michael probably be one of the few people who really will get that distinction. I started Airbnb 2014. I was trying to save newspapers before then. I was a sales consultant, and I got into the space kind of by accident because I was picking up properties to put sales guys into a place where they could just work and sell without any where they could have blinders on, And we had some empty apartments. I put them on Airbnb back at the end of 2014. So that's when I started on Airbnb, all arbitrage, not buying properties. I started a YouTube channel 2017 and just kind of committed to growth and teaching. And that's how Michael here found me, was the 8 years that I've been coaching and putting Airbnb videos out. So thanks for having me here, guys.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure and an honor, really. Sean's YouTube channel is like one of the original sources of information that a lot of people that started in the industry when there weren't as many coaches, social media wasn't as popular. It was really one of the main sources there. You can get some real information on how to launch Airbnb and how to run it efficiently. So I think Sean really had educated a lot. I know Sean has educated a lot of the folks that started very early on. I mean, Sean, you're in 10 years now. In these 10 years, you must have some crazy stories. If you want to share one with us, what was a memorable guest experience you had as a host?
The most memorable one and probably the most impactful one are kind of different. Like I remember the first time somebody died in an Airbnb property. Like that was probably the most memorable. He died of natural causes. He was like a medical placement in Fort Worth, and he was just there for a few months, and we just stopped hearing from him. And one day, like the building management went in for a repair and found the guy on the floor. He'd been there a while, and his dog, it was not so long that his dog starved to death, but his dog was there like protecting the body. And that was a really, really interesting moment of realization that, wow, I've been in this game a while and this stuff is going to start to happen eventually, So the whole seen it all thing includes people dying in your units.
Yeah, well, I'm glad it was natural causes. It's one of the big things that scares people about launching this business and doing Airbnbs is the guests, right? You have different guests coming in that stay short periods of time. Just the spectrum of people is very different. So how do you control all that? So we'll definitely hit on that in the pod. What was the impactful one? You said it was different. So this is the most memorable. What was the most impactful?
Well, the reason why I left Philadelphia was also death related, but we ended up booking properties to like a group of people who were booking a bunch of Airbnbs throughout the city, and they all were gang affiliated. And then they all started breaking into Airbnbs all over Philly because we're in Fishtown, Kensington, Northern Liberties, Chinatown, stuff like that. And so those Chinatown, Fishtown, Northern Liberty's properties were getting targeted by these gangs, and they broke in over the course of 6 months, tons and tons and tons of times. They ended up killing a 73-year-old man on camera. They beat him to death with a road cone, like some of the teenagers in the gang. So the police worked with us to catch the gang because they were breaking into our properties. But the fact that the guys got arrested at our Airbnb property was the reason why they started to really case us out specifically, and they beat one of my housekeeping staff and put him in the hospital. So we shut down Philadelphia because of gang activity. That was the most impactful one.
Yeah, that's as you may know, all of my arbitrage units are in Philadelphia. It's definitely the
Mm-hmm.
city has a well earned reputation. It can be rough around the edges, but um, that's
Mm-hmm.
crazy. I hope to never have to deal with a
Deal
dead
with that.
body.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, Philadelphia is also immensely profitable in the summer too. You know what I mean? It's like with a heavy heart, we got out of the market, but um, yeah, if you've got the right properties with a doorman, I think is probably the best, right?
Yeah,
You got a
all of
doorman
us.
at your property, you're going to be, yeah,
Yeah, no, we
yeah.
yeah,
So that's probably the big difference.
that's definitely a prereq. I saw a lot of the single family homes get targeted for parties during COVID, especially. So having that deterrent of a front desk and making them check in, and I think that's a great you tease out a great point. Like just because like you have to really kind of understand the property and the physical layout of it, even if the numbers work. There's another layer that ensures or helps bolster your chances of success, like that front desk, like having cameras, things like that that help people, deter bad actors and help you manage your property. And I'm excited to kind of dig into that. Maybe for just take a step back. What does your portfolio look like today? Like, how does your business look like today?
Well, we're still mostly arbitrage, right? We do some co-hosting now too. We're still over 100 properties. Pulling back Philadelphia, cut like 30 something properties out of our portfolio. Um, but we're largely arbitrage, and those arbitrage are mostly apartments still. We have a couple house arbitrages. We've got a small handful, like less than a dozen co-host properties, which is revenue share for anybody listening, where we don't pay the rent, we just split the revenue. So that's kind of where we're at. We've done a lot of leaning out, but we started that leaning out process like 16, 18 months ago. I put out a video 2 summers ago going that the market was going to get tough. And I warned everybody, if you have a co-host, you're going to get killed. And sadly, I think I was right. And so we started getting a little bit defensive like over a year ago, which has been really good for us. And so now we're kind of on the path to prospect properties where we can pick up the bones of where people have given up because they just got beat up a little bit too bad, or we're going to try to take advantage of the multifamily if there's an opportunity that comes because, there's a meltdown with debt products and stuff like that in the commercial property space. And if it affects multifamily in any way, we're going to try to take good advantage of that. So yeah, we're now prospecting because we feel like we're reaching that end of the bust phase. And I think we did a good job hanging in there. So we're going to start getting aggressive again.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think there's gonna be a lot of opportunity in the multifamily space. There's just a lot of inventory, a lot of new construction over the last 3 years post COVID with low rates, and just a lot of these are starting to come online this year, early next year. So they're going to be in need of occupancy, and we provide a very Airbnb rental arbitrage specifically provides a really nice solution to that. Now, obviously it's easier said than done. You need to have other pieces in place, but there's definitely in my view, a market opportunity, especially in some of the Sunbelt states, Nashville, Tampa, Phoenix, Dallas, where there's just a lot more multifamily. Where are your operations generally concentrated? Maybe not like every individual city, but where are most of your
Well,
units?
we're heavy Texas, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, Houston, heavy
Okay.
Texas, and then suburbs, right? Some of my favorite properties are like North Dallas suburbs, like Richardson, Rowlett, Addison, Plano, like that, just along that belt, that beltway, the 628, 635, 635 on the north side between Dallas and Frisco. That whole spread is really, really good.
Okay. And then why don't we take a trip down memory lane, right? Starting 14, it was kind of a personal need that you had or a business need that you had. You had to house your sales staff so they could, kind of have their blinders on and focus. What was it about there that like what was from that kind of initial experience that you're like, okay, like I want to grow this arbitrage portfolio versus buying, right? Because obviously you were successful, you had a successful business. Like, why not buy? Why kind of continue with that arbitrage strategy? So, over the last 10 years. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Well, I guess the part that's interesting about that is I was a business owner. I saw the value of owning a businesses that cash flow. Never touched real estate, right? So when I started doing Airbnb, I had no real estate relationship to the idea, right? So I had these units that I rented for sales staff to live in. And then I put them on Airbnb so that way I wouldn't lose money on rent and they started to cash flow. So I was leasing properties, furnishing them, and then making a profit on them. And I held those for probably 2 years. I just kept like 3 or 4 apartments for 2 years until the Super Bowl hit in Houston, 2017. And that's when I really thought there'd be an opportunity to make some real money. So I scaled up to 10 apartments right before the Super Bowl, 2017, and made like 15 grand in net profit that weekend. And that's when I was like, this is really cool. But by then, like the main virtue of building the business model was selling people into giving me leases. It was more of what I knew, right? As a business owner, a lot of times you become a business owner through one of your original individual contributor strengths, and mine was sales. And so I saw a very clear relationship to my ability to conduct sales, my ability to pick up leases, and then I'd sell people and giving me leases, furnish it, and operate. So I saw it as another version of sales, not another version of real estate. So when I made my YouTube channel in 2017 is because my best friend, who is a real estate agent, was arguing with another real estate agent, more like a debate, right? And he's like, do you buy properties for cash flow? Do you buy properties for debt pay down? And they mentioned Airbnb for cash flow, right? And I'm like, wait, I'm cash flowing on Airbnb and I don't buy any property. I don't do real estate. So one of my first viral videos was about not buying a property to do Airbnb, like hot take, right? And from there, I'm like, I'm going to show you guys this is possible. I already have 10 doors. I'm going to pick up more and keep showing you. And that's how the journey started. So I guess the reason why I never got into real estate was, one, Airbnb is not real estate and it was never real estate. And two, I committed to showing people that methodology on YouTube. So it's like by principle, if only by principle, I was never going to buy a property ever. And you being in like the Wall Street world know, companies can have massive valuations. So like Sonder went public at 1.8 billion through an SPAC before, of course, that tanked, right? It's so low now. But yeah, you can own a company and that company can be worth something. So I see businesses as an asset. I don't have to own property to have an asset.
Yeah, the cash flow is very. I mean, the cash flow is great in arbitrage, which is why I love it too. But I do want to let's peel that a little bit, because I think that sounds like a huge topic of the people don't want to do arbitrage, because they say, hey, ultimately the leases are going to end. I don't get any of the appreciation or the tax benefits. I don't see the point of rental arbitrage. I think you, as someone that's been doing this for so long, what would your response to that be? Like, this is hospitality? If you want to buy rest of real estate, it's just something different. Like, well, how would you respond to someone that kind of came to you with that question or that criticism of this business model?
Yeah, so arbitrage is not cool because you don't get the tax benefit. Well, if you think about it, when you buy an investment property with 20% down, you don't get to write off the 20% down payment, right? You can write off the 3% of the home value when you start to like depreciate it, or you can do a cost segregation, right? But all things being equal, if you put $150,000 down on a property, you can write off 3% of 750,000, something like that, right? And so you only get to write off, say, $25,000 or something of the 150,000 you put down, maybe something like that, right? And so for that reason, you're still not actually going to catch up on your taxes until maybe year 4 or 5 in. But when you do arbitrage, if you put $150,000 into an arbitrage business, because it's FF&E and rents and labor, 100% is written off already. You don't need a tax benefit, right? You can accelerate depreciate. Well, up until this year, you could take 100% accelerated depreciation on furniture, right? I think now it's like 80 or 75%. So you don't need the tax benefit. If you're scaling your short-term rental business, then if you're deploying your cash back into the company, everything is a write-off right away. So you're not looking for that hideout. And there are points where you could either buy real estate if you're looking for the tax benefit, or you could start your own insurance product, like the ones that they use to self-insure, where you can hide $2 million a year in the market if you wanted to do that. There's all sorts of ways that you can look for extra tax deductions if you're looking for it. Not being part of the appreciation of a property, again, you're not putting 20% down on the property. So If it costs you $150,000 plus $30,000 of furniture to start one Airbnb, that's $180,000, right? And that property may appreciate plus cash flow year over year. So your total net income, including appreciation on the property and debt pay down, yeah, sure, it's going to be better than one or two Airbnbs in arbitrage. But when you take a $750,000 property that becomes a $1 million property over, say, even to say 4 years, right? Because there's some neck break appreciation that happened over the last 4 years. So you make $250,000 in appreciation and $7,000 in net cash for 48 months, call it, let's say, call that 50 months for the fast math. You've made like $600,000 in 4 years on that one property. You weren't able to get any of that cash really back out of it, aside from maybe the $350,000, right? Because everything else is debt pay down and appreciation. If somebody else put almost $200,000 into a short-term rental arbitrage business, you could have 30 units right out the gate, and those 30 units could start to cash flow, and you can get another 30 units inside of a months. We can redeploy the same amount of cash every 6 months easy. So inside of 18 months or 2 years, that company probably is profiting over $600,000 a year inside of 2 years with the same investment, right? So even though there's no appreciation and debt pay down, even though you've attained $600,000 of profit over 4 years on your $180,000 investment, that same $180,000 investment will have a company that's making $600,000 a year by year 2, if for $180,000 in. So
Yeah.
if you look at all things being equal, I'll take $600,000 a year cash every year, starting year 2, as opposed to waiting 4 years for it.
Yeah, I don't dispute the math. And I agree, to a certain extent about the math on rental arbitrage. Like, there's nothing else. When done correctly, there's very, very few investments that can cash flow like this. Then you can redeploy. You get your money back pretty quickly. If you have concessions, it further shortens your payback. I think at least the way I think about it is, I mean, the bonus depreciation that's the game changer. Like, that was the game changer when it came into effect. And now it's at 60, maybe it goes back to 100 with some new legislation in the House right now. But what I like about it is it's the non-cash depreciation, right? Because with arbitrage, you have to, and I'm saying this as someone that's a very big proponent of running arbitrage. What I don't love about it is all the deductions you pay for in cash. Like, you actually have to spend the money to do it, to buy the furniture, to get the deduction. Whereas in a property, and furniture has no value fundamentally. Once if it's not in use, it's actually a liability, right? You got to pay money to take it out, you got to store it, all that fun stuff that no one wants to do. So what you hopefully can achieve with buying and renting at the same time, at least in my view, is you get that non-cash depreciation. And now with bonus depreciation, it's probably like 25% of your property's purchase price. So you can get like half of your money back initially, and you own this asset that hopefully will appreciate. So again, I think it's just kind of different ways of playing. There's just different ways of playing this game. But I think for people that are starting out, the goal of, like, if you want to make cash quickly and you have the time to do that, it absolutely makes sense to do arbitrage, because the cash that goes in one property is never going to equate what that cash can translate into if you got multiple Airbnb units. And the downside, of course, is like you're operating 20, 30, 40 units versus one unit, right? So you got to have the systems in place, the people in place, right? And I think, Sean, that's where I want to take this conversation next is, and that's what you do a great job of going through your journey and educating people on how to actually scale this business, right? From pricing, design, people, and teams. Maybe just talk us through that. Like, what were some of the initial struggles what were some of the initial struggles you had, and how did kind of talking about the journey help you, maybe kind of demystify that for people that haven't gone through that? Or did that help in your process as you were very public about it and going through the growing pains of launching any business, let alone a new Airbnb business?
Yeah, there's that adage that you learn the most when you teach, right? I think that is valid. One of my biggest problems is I'm a do-it-yourself guy. I'm heavy DIY. And my thought of what a good Airbnb property looked like has been trash for years. And I'm only finally now having a different approach to that. Finally. So being DIY, I had up to 30 units before I hired a manager, taking phone calls till 1 a.m. I was just working my butt off. Being ADHD, it was easy for me to do that. I could give all my focus to the business, got up to 30 doors. before it started to become a little too much, right? Then I hired somebody out. So I think the big lessons for me are over the years was the industry has evolved from a spot where you could be a 25-year-old kid who doesn't know what interior design is. You could be a guy who's terrible at design, where you've got a couch and you got a TV, and people would pay money for that. Back in 2015, 16, 17, you could survive with poor design. Now, there is more of a commoditization of the industry. And the way to not be commoditized is to create a product that doesn't look like a commodity. And that's something we've learned over the last couple of years. You got to cut through the volume, you got to cut through the noise. And me teaching, not on YouTube per se, but ever since I started coaching 4 or 5 years ago, looking at people's individual problems, hearing the story that they told me about why they thought they were failing, and then me seeing what actually was failing, allowed me a few different ways to learn, right? Because it also reminded me to check my own biases. Like, I might think that some of my projects aren't working out for a different reason. I'm hearing people's BS every day. And I'm like, yeah, I could be full of it too. So I learned a lot about myself through coaching. I learned a lot about how to recontext what I know so someone else can hear it in a way that was good for them. One of my biggest revenue management education products that's going into my book that I'm releasing is about zones. And I created this concept of zones for revenue because it was the easiest way for most people to understand lead time is a good way to visualize it. If I wasn't teaching people one-on-one how to price their calendars, that would have never come to me. A lot of my revelations on pricing has been people coming to me going, why is my house on the beach not getting priced? Like, why am I not getting bookings? Why is my inner city high rise not getting bookings? So yeah, you learn the most when you teach. It's been awesome. And one of the major takeaways I think anybody should take away from a podcast like this is this business is robust. There is sales, there is accounting, there's customer experience, there's logistics, there is supply chain. There's so many things that you can learn to run a whole hospitality business. You're going to be good at one or two things naturally because every job touches one of them. You are either in human resources, you are either in customer service or sales, or you were a carpenter, or you did housekeeping, right? Every job touches a part of this business. So you'll have something that naturally fits and you'll feel good doing that. And you should really touch that a lot so you can build your business in a way that feels good. But at any point you can reach a size that you are no longer qualified to do everything. And that's okay. Yeah. You should look for that size and start to hire people that are not you, that disagree with you, that see the world differently than you. At that point, now you're running a real business, and that it gets fun. It's a real fun time.
What do you think that size is now? Because I feel like that size has changed now from, even from 3 years ago to now. Let me ask you, what's the optimal size for someone to switch from, a simple PMS or just doing it on the Airbnb app to something a little more robust, like a more higher end property management system? Like,
well, so there are lightweight ones like Host Hub. Host Hub is really lightweight. They connect by co-host. Okay. Like Host Hub makes a co-host invite, so you can connect Vrbo, Airbnb, and stuff like that. That one's really, really lightweight, and people with 50 plus properties can still use that. But if you're on Booking.com because you're in an international market, then Booking.com requires something heavy duty just out the gate because Booking.com is a mess. So really, that answer is dependent on how reliant are you on being multi-channel. And some markets, you don't want to miss Booking.com bookings in places like Philadelphia, New York, right? No. You don't want to miss out on that. Or Boston. Places like Fort Lauderdale will still benefit big time from Booking.com. So
even the Smokies now, places that you wouldn't think Booking.com is like, Booking.com is like 10% of my Smokies business now, actually. It's wild.
That's nuts.
They've really come up, actually.
That's cool. So yeah, for that reason, I think that is one step in. There's going to be a step into complexity because you go multi-channel with channels that are klutzy like Booking.com. So stepping into complexity, if you don't have the mind for it, you may need a second person there. Then there's like stepping up in volume on things. Like once you have 15 or 20 apartments, you're going to have 3 or 5 housekeepers. And managing a team of 3 or 5 housekeepers requires some people skills, right?
Yeah.
Requires some thoroughness, continue to inspect what you expect, right? And you may need somebody who's a little bit more hands-on to be. Then there's like the fact that multiple things could need volume, right? You'll have housekeeping doing things. You're going to have guest check-ins and every guest has got questions. And you'll find that you love to fill your time with certain things, but then some hosts, they never file resolution claims for damages. They'll document it, but then they fail to go through the resolution process because they found themselves so busy with everything else that they don't want to touch something. So at one point, you can get so busy that you do neglect a portion of the company, and that neglecting can cost you a lot of money. And the main two that will cost you a bunch of money, 3, is quality control on your housekeepers, revenue management, and resolutions are probably the 3. So if you find yourself ever slacking on any of those 3, it is time for a person.
Yeah, it's funny. You kind of answered my next question there. I was asking you like what the low hanging fruit is, and those are the top 3 on my list. And I just want to peel back the onion a little bit here. If your quality control isn't good, like what Sean said, then your reviews are going to be not 5 stars, and then you kind of get into this bad feedback loop of having a lower price to get people in, and then the less money you make, the less you can invest in your properties, right? Revenue management, I want to hit on that next. And then resolution claims, like that's a big one. I think the best feature Airbnb for hosts, outside of just they have great SEO and there's so much volume that goes in there, is the air cover program. Air cover program, they really will cover, if you document it right, they will cover most everything that happens there. So it's a great way to not to charge the guests for damages that they cause, but it takes time to do. And that's where hiring a virtual assistant is really important. And that's my next question. When do you think is the right time to hire a virtual assistant? Because, and I just want to preface this because my view is you shouldn't view it as a cost center. That VA will pay for itself just from doing the resolution claims properly. But I would love to get your view on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to build on what you just said in a way, you may think that you're the best producer of like anything in the world, right? Like you were the Kobe Bryant, LeBron James of Airbnb, right? No one can beat you at anything. So you do all of your own resolutions, you do all your own pricing, you do all your own like guest experience stuff because you're the best. Sure. But if you take 5 good players and force Kobe Bryant to try to beat 5 good players, even though none of them are half as good as him, the 5 will win against the 1, right? So the moment that you can't play a good game in all of your categories is the moment you need a VA. Or we don't necessarily call them VAs because I hire American, like I hire local usually, because sometimes somebody has to show up at a property. And if my remote worker could hop in the car and save the day, we would like that as an option, you know? So we still try to hire local. We call that position a firefighter. There's always somebody who's a firefighter on shift or afloat. But then I think the moment you can give somebody 15 hours of work is the moment you can hire somebody by the hour to do something. Okay. I think 15 is pretty good.
So 15 hours. Okay, 15 hours. How do you construct your team right now? Like, what's your org chart look like right now?
You know, that's the funniest. Like, just a Google search how to design an org chart. Right? I knew nothing about business, and I tried to do this back in 2011, 12 when I first started my sales company. And I'm like, I want to start a new business, but I don't know who to hire and what position they're going to be and how many people need to be where. And I'm like trying to Google search how to decide what positions go into a company, right? But I knew so little about business. One of my superpowers is if there's something I need to know, I can find it, right? And this is one of those topics where I couldn't find the answer because I didn't know the lingo enough, right? I didn't know what to ask Google to get to the right article, right? Or the right YouTube video. And so now I can speak forever on my org chart, which is fun. And it's going to look different for everybody, right? Depending on if you build deep in one city, if you build wide in multiple cities at the same time. For people getting started, the easiest way to look at this is like the same way that the military builds business, like builds their units. Like you got 4 people in a unit and one of them is a supervisor, right? And then you have 4 units, and out of the 4 units, one person's a lead of the 4 units, right? So that's like 4x4 thing. So we have 3 housekeepers, and then when we have a 4th housekeeper, somebody's a lead or a supervisor. And then we try to have 3 or 4 teams of housekeepers, 3 or 4 teams of 4, and then somebody oversees all of that, right? And then from there, when we get into like interdisciplinary or like multiple silos, the best book for this is The Leadership Pipeline. It's a great book for people to understand kind of how as you grow, you need to start to respect other silos of expertise. And long story short, we have our housekeeping team. And honestly, an Airbnb business at scale is a housekeeping company. That's really what it is, right? It's a housekeeping business. And then you have your offshoots, right? I try to build a housekeeping team full of supervisors until we have one manager. And then once we have a good leader, everything we build is to give that one leader support everywhere that they need. And everything grows around. That person becomes like the center of the organization. But the main undershoot is the housekeeping organization.
I couldn't agree more. Everyone be very, very nice to your housekeepers. I see sometimes people talk about their housekeepers, would like treating them like they're someone just to clean. They're your eyes and ears on the ground. Like make sure you treat them with respect, treat them the way that you want to be treated. They make or break your Airbnb business, literally. That is outside of you, that's the first thing to hire out is you shouldn't be doing your own cleaning, right? Especially running as a business. I know some people will clean because they want to kind of keep the cleaning fee all themselves. It's pretty hard to scale a business if you're spending kind of the bulk of the workday cleaning. Cleaners are first, and then customer service agents are next, and then you kind of scale from there. And at least that's the way that we've done it.
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
have 4 VAs plus an accounting person for 31 properties. We're probably a little overstaffed, I think,
You're
but
heavy on VAs, in my opinion, for sure.
we are. We
Yeah.
are. I mean, I think one nice thing is like we're profitable, and I'd rather hire it out than do it myself. To just be very candid, I really want to focus on the growth of the business. So there's
Well, it's also good to have enough staff for scale. So when you add 10 properties, you don't end up in a spot, right?
yeah, fair. They can just add on. Actually, you hit on a point. I do want to talk about revenue management. I don't before I lose this point. What's your view on one market deep versus multiple markets and wide? Right. I have a very strong point of view there, but I'm curious on your point of view.
Well, there's two levels of going wide, but you can go wide in one city by diversifying your product, right? So I say go deep. And as you go deep, your revenue management will actually inform you if you're starting to oversaturate a specific product, right? And you can start to diversify to studios and 4-bedroom houses, right? And then pick up some 2 bedrooms, right? Pick up some stuff that are like in a nearby suburb. Have stuff that's hyper location specific. Have stuff that's highly amenitized. And if your products are diverse, then you can be in one city and you can nail. I could do 300 doors in Dallas, no problem. I could do 300 doors in Dallas. It won't be an issue, as long as we have diverse locations, diverse property types, diverse design styles. You can go deep in one city. And I think it's hyper important because affording top end leadership requires volume, affording your big, expensive people.
Yeah, fair.
And the big, expensive, resourceful people should be approximate to where you're making your money, right? Imagine hiring a CEO that is 3 hours away from anything of consequence or farther, right? Um, I think and nobody here is going to hire a CEO. No one that we're talking to, maybe a few, are shopping around for that high level of a position. But to get there, your middle and lower management, you're recruiting from the field. Housekeepers can become supervisors. Supervisors can become assistant managers. Customer service staff can be director of guest experience, could take over all of accounts receivable and resolutions. If you're promoting from within, almost all of your best candidates are people who are touching your properties, which means you need more properties in those areas so you can build bigger teams. And you are now solving the one biggest problem in your organization by building deep in a city, which is your talent problem, right? Hiring good talent is the most expensive thing you'll ever do.
Yeah.
And so if you can hire a bunch of people cheap, like Bucky's style, right? Like if you're hiring housekeepers for 17 an hour and you're giving them an opportunity to move up in the org chart, that's the best way to build a business. And then at one point, that org chart is so robust in Dallas. If I wanted to leave to another city, I can literally leave it for 6 months or a year and it would run itself, right? That's how strong you want your team, right? It's hard to build in 5 cities at once. If you want to build to any real scale, the only way you can be in 5 cities at once is by hiring co-hosts or building it yourself. But if you're going to build it yourself, you have to build to a size. You got to be at fighting weight.
Right. Agreed. No, that I think that's. I think I see too many people kind of start off by going like 1 or 2 units in like multiple cities, and then they just wear themselves out because, to your point, like that top end talent, you really want that close to your center of gravity. And if you're just spread too thin, you're just never going to be able to get the economies of scale in order to really kind of build this business. Because I'm curious on your take on this too. Is when you have so many in one city, right? I think you talked to this about revenue management. I think a lot of people get scared too, like, oh, I don't really, I don't, I'm scared of putting all my eggs in one basket in one city, and I want to diversify. And there's the famous Buffett saying, right? Concentration is when you build wealth. I'm paraphrasing. Diversification is keeping wealth. I very much believe in that. I think if you find a market that works, like you really want to lean into that versus like going in for a few and then you have to kind of rebuild everything and a completely different system in a different city with different people, maybe not a different system, but definitely a different team. I guess what would you do in that situation? Would you counsel people to consolidate, or do you have a view on that?
So people fearing getting knocked out because they're in one city and whack-a-mole comes and gets them, right? So they want to be in multiple cities at once. I would be more afraid of, let's say you have 3 kids, right? Let's say you have 3 kids under the age of 4, and you're saying, I'm afraid that this grocery store is going to catch fire and all my kids are going to die. So I'm going to take my baby in the stroller. I'm going to wheel that baby to Home Depot and leave it there.
Yeah.
And I'm going to wheel this baby to 7-Eleven over here. And then I'm going to take one of my kids and I'm going to go shopping at Central Market with one kid, right? Do you really want to leave something so valuable to no supervision, no adequate supervision, right? If you cannot run one city well enough to survive those hard things that you're afraid of, you can't run 3, right? Right. Where hosts actually go out of business is when they go multi-city and they don't have the proper systems to be
I
2
agree.
places
Oh
at once.
man, that's a good
And
point.
and then the quality erodes in one city and they funnel profits from the good city to their eroding city. And then all their profits from the city, like those start to go away because they're trying to save this thing because their ego says, I have to survive everywhere. I can't ever take a step back. I mean, people misunderstand what their strength is. And your biggest strength, no matter what industry you're in, is your willingness to kill to survive,
Yeah.
right? And in this business, when you're a small startup, you know nothing, and that's okay. You're not as good as us, and that's okay. Your willingness to cut somebody's throat out to keep your company in business is going to be the thing that saves you at one point. You will put yourself into the trenches and do anything to survive. And one point, that's going to be what saves you. And you can't be in 3 cities to fight that fight.
Yeah. I love the analogy of, you will do anything you need to survive, especially a small business. That's why I think the arbitrage business actually lends itself to entrepreneurs and kind of small organizations, because you see a lot of these bigger organizations collapse, right? During COVID, the Stay Alfreds of the world, and now more recently, Front Desk, some of the other, Ariva, some of the other bigger players. Sonder is, having its issues. You know, I don't believe that this business scales in that way, where you can have a CEO and have 200 people, because you ultimately need to kind of be in this business, like be willing to do unnatural things in order to make to survive. And having a large distributed organization where everyone's a W-2 worker is just not a recipe for success. You have you have things go wrong, like no one's accountable. I'll share a personal story. When one of these companies went under, I hired 4 of the people there because I was like, okay, they have good talent. Let me hire them. I really let go of 3 of those people. It's because their accountability was 0. They're like, well, actually, a problem come up, be like, they would say, oh, actually, yeah, no, I never dealt with that. That was this apartment. So I would just slack it over to them. And it was like, wait, what? Like, this problem needs to be solved now. Like the HVAC isn't working. Wait, you don't call the building to get it fixed? No. I slack it to a team, and then they go talk to the manager on the ground, and then they go and talk to the person. And that was just like bewildering. I was like, okay, like this is not going to survive here. Just as an example. So I think when people get freaked out by some of these bigger companies not going under, I think for me, I believe it's a business model issue, not an Airbnb arbitrage or even an Airbnb issue. So I'm curious on your take on that. You've seen, I mean, from, when this was a very boutique business and then all the venture capital came in, and now we're on the other side of that. Maybe give some perspective to the audience of how you think how an organization can scale with Airbnbs, and what is like kind of what's the optimal kind of business model for this, or business size for this, if that makes sense.
Well, if you are loyal to the right KPIs, if you want to put it in a KPI stance, or you have the right values, I think you can scale this business and stay big, right? I hired people from Stay Alfred too, right? And I've had people last years after Stay Alfred, right? But yeah, they one of my friends is having a problem in the pharmaceutical world the same way, where he's now putting the same benefits as Pfizer has, like a month off and really good benefits. But now he's hiring soft people, right? You try to become this
Yeah.
big formal business with bureaucracy and benefits, and you're hiring people who value that safety and the work-life balance and not having to care, right? But when you're a small, scrappy business, the type of people that will work for you without benefits, without paid vacation time, they value the win. They're in a business because they want it to
They value the
matter.
win.
So I think the most important thing is you don't lose that. No matter how big you get, you hire people who want their name to be on it somehow, you know? And that's how I was able to I took 2 years off, right? Because I put somebody in a position where her name was on it. She was so proud of everything she did. But where we started to fail there was we lacked good prevention, right? So I had to jump back in because there was a level of upkeep and issues prevention that could have kept guests from having to be so high. We had a lot of high touch issues where like we just needed more staff to help guests out, but all that could have been prevented. And that's probably so the lack of innovation where the company started to wear off at certain points, and having that really wise person who can kind of see things for what they are. Since I wasn't in that organization, other people's blind spots became the reason why I needed to step back in. So I think knowing what I know now, I confidently think that a property company like ours could do 3,000, 4,000 doors as long as every team doesn't get bigger than a certain size and doesn't lose the core tenets of the values of, like you were talking about response time with HVAC, right? The guest always comes first. Prevention is better than cure. It's make sure that the property looks as good as it did its first day. We have this phrase, like new condition, in part of our quality checks. If a housekeeper isn't sure whether or not to report something, we just have them simply ask, is this like new condition? And if it's not, then the answer is obvious, right? And those are the types of things. If you can instill truths, right? Mantras, we have these, what we call 4 mantras of step 4 that they have to memorize in their cleaning system. And because they have to memorize these things, because it becomes a part of their life, those things never go unchecked, right? And most people who start this business and then grow to that size of 1,000 or 2,000 doors, they never worked in a successful corporation. So they don't know what lengths successful corporations go through to make sure that things don't break at scale, right? Going from personality-driven businesses to process-driven businesses, you're actually asking for trouble when you go and become a process-driven organization and you lose that personality leadership. So how can you keep 10 teams personality-driven enough that you can find time to really build the right processes and things don't fall apart on you, right? I think keep your team small, but duplicate that sauce.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. It's hard. It's hard to find good people. It really is, and it's hard to find them and then keep them. But I mean, if you can do that, I think that is your probability of success is much higher. I think for a lot of these companies, it just, at least in my experience, hiring someone to staff from there, just they definitely didn't have that kind of they didn't have that kind of mentality, and I think that's a big reason why some of them have failed. And I mean, I wanted to touch on that point because I do see a lot of people kind of talk about why that, hey, Michael, why, how can I be successful if I only have 10 units, but these people have 100 units and they went under? Like, does that mean this is a bad business? And I think I think you're shining a light on that too. It's the fact that their teams weren't constructed properly, or things that happened that were too big. Now you can get bigger if you have the right stuff in place, but when you have venture capital come in and you're being rewarded on growth, like a lot of those things don't matter. And I think here it's just, this is a private equity model type business, right? You're running this for cash flow. For growth's sake is meaningless, really. You really, every unit needs to make money for you, and that's my mantra. We actually just focus on 2 bedrooms. We don't do 1 bedrooms from studios actually. Just given, I just think it's hard to grow and keep the quality up. So I might as well just get bigger units that make more dollar margin for me. Um, but like, I think everyone can play this game a lot differently. I think that's why educating yourself, finding a strategy that works for you is the best. Look, I could talk all day. I know we're running way past over. But I really appreciate you spending time here today.
Yeah.
And as we kind of wind down, what's on your growth path for 24, right? You have a very successful business, Airbnb business. You have a very successful coaching business, education business. Like, where are you going to really allocate your time this year? Where do you see the best growth opportunities?
I'm going to put together funds and start to buy multifamily, like distressed multifamily, if I can get my hands on it, and recreate distressed multifamily into short-term rental hybrid properties. That's going to be probably one of my big ones, I think.
Okay.
Aside from that, I've got some books I'm writing. I want to get to do more public speaking. I think that's going to be fun. So it's not really like growth prospect, but it's kind of where my head's at.
Okay. Well, like you spoke in Nashville. Great. That was a great session that you held, speaking on stage with educating, I think, a set of people that probably don't hear about arbitrage or have a certain prejudice towards it. I think you help demystify a lot of that. I think it's great to actually see a person that's been successful and doing it for a long time. I think a lot of people see educators out there, people that came into space 2-3 years ago, but like when you meet someone that's been in it for a full cycle, right? It's, through COVID especially, where we had this great growth period pre-COVID, and then for those few months it was really, really scary actually. I think
Yeah.
we all were worried, like, hey, this might all go away, and then it ended up being like the best tailwind in the industry. Last year, 23 was an adjustment year. I think 24 is going to be great again. Like, it's February, it's almost end of February. You know, our numbers are looking great. I speak to our competitors are looking good as well. And I'm excited for the good things to come. I'm going to ask you my traditional closing question. Business is a team sport. We wouldn't get to where we are today without someone or people that have helped us along. What was one of the kindest things that someone has done for you to help you in this journey?
Gosh, man, I'm the lone wolf, right? Sadly. My mentor committed suicide when I was like 23. Um, and I hadn't seen him since I was like 18, 19. He he wrote a $500 check to get me into college because my Pell Grant was too small, so I couldn't start school. Not that school actually helped, but that was something he did for me once. But then he was like falsely accused of molesting kids, and then his whole world got taken from him. He's big into church and stuff. So ever since then, I haven't had anybody I've ever leaned on, anybody ever looked up to, nothing. I've always done it myself. So somebody who did something for me before my mentor killed himself was right before I went homeless. I had my car repossessed. I was in the sales newspaper world back then, and I needed to buy a vehicle, and I couldn't get a car because my credit was shot and I had a repossession. So one of my neighbors sold me a van on payments, but he also saw that my life was falling apart, right? He saw that like I was like a mess. He told me, don't lose focus. If you lose, you have so many things that you don't even realize right now that you're holding together. All these little things that just stay in place because you are who you are. If you let this stress of one failure cause you to dysregulate and lose focus, everything else will unravel. And that's when everything will actually go to hell. So no matter how bad you think this one thing is, hold it together. Don't lose focus because you don't even know how much you're actually doing just passively. I didn't take that advice back then, but it is now probably one of the coolest bits of advice I've ever gotten, and it's helped me for the decades after. So, yeah.
Shout out to your neighbor who hopefully will listen to this one day. We're all blessed to have Sean in this industry with us and educating us. No, we are. No, I mean that 100%. You've helped a lot of people get started with this. Went back when there was a lot less information. So, I'm thank you for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it. Folks probably know where to find you, but if they don't know where to look for you, what's the best way to reach out to you, Sean?
Just type the word Airbnb into YouTube and look for the beard. You'll find it.
Okay. All right. All right. You didn't always have a beard, though, sir. You didn't always.
Well, I'm top five videos. I'm top five videos almost every time now.
Well, I don't know, but you didn't always the pre the 17 18, I forget when you lost when you grew the beard, but you were clean shaven before though. So
Oh yeah, somebody just was like, how does he look so different in 18 months? I had to double check to make sure I was watching the right guy. So somebody put that in my YouTube comments. Yeah, I grew out the beard probably 2 winters ago, like October, and I just decided to keep it. I thought it was cool. So yeah, this advice might be bad. In a year, this could be gone, right? So the Airbnb look for the beard might actually not be the best advice.
Look for this. Look for the smart, handsome guy.
I'll take that. I'll take that compliment. Thank you so much.
Sean, thank you again. Appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael. I'll see you.